This is the Drake Insights Podcast, your weekly dose of cutting-edge senior living marketing insights. Join me, your host, Natasha Drake, for bold ideas, proven strategies, and inspiring stories straight from the experts. Tune in and let's conquer the senior living marketing landscape together. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Drake Insights Podcast. I am your host, Natasha Drake from Drake Strategic. Let's get started. So on today's episode, we're going to dive a little more into sales. I think the first 14 episodes I've really been focusing on marketing strategy, technologies, and I do really believe it's important for marketing and sales to really work together, right? They have to partner with operations. And if you're working with an agency partner or a consultant who doesn't understand that, you really need to make sure that your sales goals and your marketing goals are working together. So for today, we're going to dive into models specifically and how models help you sell. So in my experience, when I was doing sales about 10 to 15 years ago, every time we would stage a model, it would sell quickly, sometimes at higher prices. So I've had a lot of great experience specifically with models, but a lot of times it can be expensive. It can use your sales teams. It can use your maintenance team, and so a lot of times operators are a little nervous, right, about investing in models and truly understanding, though, the metrics and the data behind it and how this can really help your sales team be more efficient, reduce the sales time, and really increase your move-in. So before we get into it, I do want to introduce today, we have Sasha Davis, our COO from Model55, and Brigitte Specht, Chief Growth Officer at KJB Consulting. So thank you guys both for joining today. And Sasha, if you can kick us off and talk a little bit about Model55, what you all do, and how you help sales teams with your company.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Sasha Davis, the COO at Model55. We are a nationwide turnkey design firm, and we specialize in furnished spaces for senior living. So primarily models apartments. We also do sales trailers, common spaces, all the things, but the bulk of what we do is models. We've been doing models for close to 19 years, believe it or not.
Wow.
So I like to say we're a little bit of an expert. I think we're allowed to say that now. The company was really born out of this vision that design was not just something beautiful, but it was a tool that you could leverage. Early on in her career, our CEO and founder, Sharon, saw that you could use design to sell things faster, or you could use design to sell things at a higher price, what you were mentioning earlier. So that's really been at the core of the foundation of us as a company and how we serve our clients.
Now, one thing I do want to ask, and if you'll dive in a little bit, is why maybe we shouldn't just do them ourselves? And if you can talk a little more about, how, you all partnering is the right way to do it and how you go about that.
Absolutely. I have this conversation many times. There's so many reasons, more than we have time to cover today, why you should not do it yourself. The first one you sort of alluded to a little bit earlier is doing it yourself is really just means you're pulling valuable resources out of your company. So if you're asking your local sales team to put together a model, that's time that they're not following up with leads and they're down the road shopping for furniture. That's an expensive loss there. That time you're pulling them away from revenue generating tasks. And they're not going to be able to do it themselves. They're going to need their maintenance team. They're going to probably need housekeeping. I mean, there's so many people that are going to have to help them. That's a huge loss of opportunity. You're pulling resources away. It's also not sustainable. If you have a portfolio where you have communities that cross state lines, you're not going to have any consistency in your models. And your model is really a part of your brand. It's a lot of times the first impression that a resident has of your brand. And there's not going to be any consistency if you have, a different person doing a model in every single community. And then, of course, one of the biggest reasons is, like I said, we've been doing this for 19 years. When you have a leak in your shower, you're probably calling a plumber versus doing it yourselves. And that applies to the world of models as well. It's not to say that your local sales team doesn't have great design. They might. But what they're doing is they're designing a model that appeals to them. They're not designing a space that appeals to the audience, that appeals to the resident. That's something that's taken years and years of our team to understand and study. And there is actually a science behind the way we design. Your model, what's the point? It's meant to capture your potential residents, have them feel something and really feel like they could live there. And you need to do that by properly designing the space that's going to capture those emotions when they tour through it. And if you're just having, your local sales executive do it, they're designing a space that looks good to them. And that more often than not is not the same thing that looks good to a potential resident.
Yeah, I like to think about it like, you wouldn't have your sales director go give a resident a shot because that's what nurses do. And it's the same thing when it comes to models. Like, we're salespeople, we're not interior designers.
Yeah.
Can you dig in a little more to Sasha in terms of, you mentioned, setting your brand? I want to, the listeners to hear a little more about that, because that really interested me. Rather than just coming up with random models across your portfolio, I think that's really important. It's not just about designing a model for your prospect and who they are, but then across your brand and your presentation of your whole portfolio. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that was really interesting to me.
Absolutely. I mean, this is such a saturated market now. You're likely having competitors, more than one competitor in the same, vicinity as where you're located. So having a concrete brand is really important, and having a brand voice, and you can use design to do that. And usually it's in little elements. It's a lot of times it's in the accessorizing and the soft touches. When someone walks into a space, it's like the colors and the feelings. Maybe it's a scent. It's very exclusive to your brand, and they can walk into a space in any one of your, communities and feel it. And it's going to be very distinct and different than the feeling that they get when they tour a competitor down the road. And that's really important. There's a science to design, and you can weave that in to your brand. You want to weave that into your brand because so much of the sales process is emotional, and design is a way to bring that emotion to the forefront.
And I know you mentioned this before too, but also about maximizing your space. I know that's something that from a sales perspective, and Bridget, I'll let you talk a little bit about this too. We hear a lot from prospects as they're touring is they're downsizing. This is a huge life change. They're going from a whatever size giant home they've lived in for however many years to a small space. And I think that is something that I have seen personally in sales. They can't visualize it. They walk into an empty room and they go silent and they just stare. And even if it's a small model, like you put a couple pieces, it can kill the sale, I have found many times. And so when we have had models done well and professionally, a lot of times they're even our worst apartment, with like bad view or whatever, but you can see it in their eyes and their warmth. Can you talk a little bit about that too? Either one of you about maximizing
Well,
your
first
space.
of all, I totally agree. You're almost better off having an empty space than a space not done right. But it's so important. Like, one of the things when we talk to our clients, we talk to them, what are the objectives you're hearing? Like, what has been a hurdle for your sales team? And that is one of the major hurdles that we hear about is a person, a resident walks into a space and there's just no way they can see their space, all of their belongings fitting there. So that's one of the things you want to have them walk through and instantly be able to visualize themselves in that space. For example, sometimes it's subconscious, they see a reading nook. And they're like, subconsciously, they think of the book they're reading, and they think that's where they're going to sit and read it. And then there's a shelf. Oh, that's where all of my books are going to go. They walk through and, maybe the closet door is cracked open and they peek in there. And instead of it being bare and empty, they see there's bins, there's hangers, and instantly it feels recognizable to them. It's something that it evokes that emotion of like, oh, this is my home. Like I can have my belongings here. And it's those nuances. And then also utilizing small spaces creatively in design. I'm not very good at that. I'm not a professional interior designer, but our team is. They know how to utilize every inch of the space and without making it feel crowded. Functional pieces. If it's a smaller space, you're not going to use a small little nightstand. Maybe you're going to use a larger chest that also doubles as storage, and really showing the resident that. There's so many tricks and nuances that our designers can leverage in any shape of a floor plan to really maximize the potential of the space.
Yeah. I think that you can also use a model as a salesperson to really guide that personalized experience. So, your tour will look very different in a well-designed model than it will if you just have a couple of pieces in, apartment, right? I mean, I think about when I was a director of sales and pulling residents in, I want them to sit on the couch. I want them to put their feet up. I want to talk about their favorite TV shows and, kind of start to envision what it's going to be like for them sitting in that apartment, watching Jeopardy or whatever it might be. So I do think that it's really important to have a well thought out model for that reason.
And a lot of times we would end, I don't know if this is still sales strategy, we would end our visit in the model, well-designed model. And because we wanted them to sit down, to just feel like they're at home and not be in the middle of a lobby or in the middle of a, discovery room or whatever it might be, but to end there and feel like home. And so I can imagine that if you have this warm, smelling nice, environment that they're comfortable in, that's going to help that end process of that visit as well.
Absolutely. And it allows you to connect to the resident in a way that makes them feel like what it's going to be like living there, right? Like if you end your tour in a well-designed model, you can have a conversation about like, what's your favorite piece of furniture that you're going to bring with you when you move in, right? And you can start to help them visualize what those pieces will look like in a model.
Oh, you could put it on this wall, or, oh, look here, it would look
Right.
great. And, Mom, you can put this there. And yeah, just having them sort of envision that with the pieces. And if you know that ahead of time, that's helpful too, because you could probably bring them to the right model that maybe has some items that maybe they've mentioned before. I do want to take a second, Bridget, if you can introduce yourself, and can you give a little more insight into specifically from the sales side? Now, I know you work with a lot of different sales teams, sales trainings. What have you seen more so than what we've discussed so far in using models, and how this has helped your sales team?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Bridget. I'm the Chief Growth Officer from KJB Sales Consulting, and we work alongside Model55. I came from a previous senior living housing company, and we used Model55 for the entire time that I was there. So I got to experience firsthand as a director of sales and then as a regional and as a VP, what it was like to use a well thought out model in the sales process. And one of the things that I can testify to is that it does help you close your move-ins and move residents in sooner than just having a vacant space does, right? It allows them, when they're touring 2 or 3 different communities, to really remember what your community was. It's a differentiating factor sometimes between you and the competition. And so I think that coming from, the sales world, having that well-designed, branded type model really does give you the opportunity to not only increase your move-ins, but oftentimes decrease pricing sensitivity in your assisted living or independent living community.
Yeah, can you talk more about that? Because I think that's something I used to hear often on the operations side, is when we would ask for models or things, it's the fear of the investment, right? And that's a large investment, and we'll just quickly do it ourselves, and we'll just pull some people. Can you talk a little bit about the investment, and then at the same time, how the model helps overcome pricing sensitivity, and so how those kind of work together?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when residents and their families come to an assisted living, life plan community, independent living, any kind of senior living community, they're initially sticker shocked, to be honest with you, because it's a huge investment. They're not accustomed to making that large of a monthly investment or upfront investment. And so, you've already got that in the back of their minds when you're having a conversation with them. If you take them through a tour and the model is very well designed with the things that your brand, makes them feel, then you typically will find that they will buy. And there's a study that was done a while back that talked about how pricing sensitivity is overcome through product aesthetics. And so, if things look nicer, you think about a Coach bag. I mean, people will buy a Coach bag because they look good, they've got good zippers, and it's the same thing for a model. I mean, if it looks good, if it feels good, they're going to be more apt to spend $10,000 a month than they would be if it was just an empty apartment.
And a lot of times I think, no, I don't want to say it hides, because we shouldn't say it hides things, but I'll be honest, when I bought my house, it was just redone and it was staged really nicely. And I think sometimes you're so overwhelmed by some of that you then can envision yourself. You then maybe overlook, oh, there's a little scratch here, or there's a little thing here, where a lot of times when you take them into an apartment, even though you're gonna completely repaint and recarpet and whatever, they'll see that little thing and go, oh, this place, doesn't take care of their apartments, right? So I think a lot of times too, that's probably why they're, I don't want to say blinded by, but like you're saying with the Coach bag, a lot of times they see those things, they can not only envision themselves and their things, but it also elevates it, and you can charge those prices then, and they get less sticker shock, I think is what you're trying to say when they see that staged like that.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. It also, I think, a lot of times if you use models for a sales strategy, you can decrease the vacant days on the market, right? For apartments or cottages that you might have. And that's the same thing. I mean, the National Realtors Association did a study that showed that having a staged, if you will, I know Sasha doesn't really like the word staged sometimes, but have a staged, home will decrease the number of days that it sits on the market, but it also increases the real estate offer by 1% to 5%. And that's just another supporting factor in that people will buy things and pay for things that make them feel good.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to add also, maybe Sasha, you can touch on this in terms of the operational investment in someone like Model55, right, to design these models. That can also probably seem shocking sometimes to operators. So I do want to talk about it. I do have operators that listen to the podcast. So, I think if you can explain, or you or Bridget explain a little more about in the long run, I think we've kind of self-explanatory a little bit, but in the long run, how this does save you money over time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Bridget has a lot to say here from her experience, but there's so much return on investment. First of all, sales incentives. I mean, your sales teams are already giving out a ton of incentives, even if they're giving out, 1 month free. If they're giving out a free month, they have to give that out over and over and over again to every resident. If you invest in one really nice looking model, that one model will continuously sell itself over and over again. And, we can run the numbers for you based on your rents. Like, how many sales would you need to pay off the model? It pays for itself so quickly.
Mhm.
It really does. And, when we were talking earlier about doing it yourself, at the forefront, it seems like you're saving money doing it yourself, but you really are not. If you add up all the hours and time that your local team invests in doing it themselves, you get much less of a return on that investment than you do by, working with a professional.
Yeah. I would add that now more than ever, investing in a model is so incredibly important to the marketing side of the business, because I have been on websites recently doing mystery shops for our own company. And there are some models that are on websites that would not invite me to bring my family member in. And so it's really important that you invest in a good model and then you update your pictures on the website, because the majority of people are doing their shops on the web prior to even stepping into your community to experience that model.
Yeah, absolutely. I know on the marketing side, we love to use those. Then if you're doing lifestyle shots, you have another location to use in your community so that you're not just taking pictures in those common, community spaces. And then you touched on too, how it's also saving money is not using the team. I think that's also really important. I remember many times being pulled out of the sales zone to honestly like go to Home Goods or whatever and help with the model setup. And at the time, maybe it seemed fine, but I'm realizing how many hours then are operators pulling sales teams, housekeeping, maintenance, whoever, right, out of their time working, and especially sales teams out of the selling zone to be doing this, when that investment would be better placed in, a model company, if I'm saying that correctly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's hours, valuable time that you're not following up on leads.
Is there anything more, Bridget, you want to mention from the sales perspective?
I mean, the great thing about Model 55 is that you don't have to take the people out on your sales side, right? And they have this amazing process where it's almost like magic from a salesperson's perspective. It's like you have an empty apartment, and then all of a sudden, poof, this like model fairy comes in, and then you've got this gorgeous apartment, and you haven't had to lift a finger. You could have called 50 other people or sent 50 emails in that time frame. So I think that's the greatest thing, is just the process by which they make it all happen behind the scenes.
Well, that's perfect segue, because Sasha, if you wouldn't mind, I know there are other providers of this, but I do want Model 55. I want everyone to know your process and how easy that is for operators.
Yeah, absolutely. We are fully turnkey. I know that that's like a word that gets thrown out a lot, but we do it all. When we partner with our clients, you get one point of contact. We have an amazing account management and project management team who really become like an extension of your team. They're your eyes and ears internally, making sure everything is getting done for you. So when we start on a project, typically first thing we do is get boots on the ground. Like I said, we're nationwide. We have resources everywhere. And what they do is they actually go on site. They want to see the space. They take measurements. They take photos. We probably did receive a floor plan from you, but floor plans don't tell the whole story. So we like to get in there, see the space. And then what we do next is we have a vision call. And this is really one of the most critical points in the process. And it's really one of the only times where you're going to be really involved in the process. Otherwise, you get to take a back seat and let us do everything. But on that vision call is really where we talk about what matters to you, what matters to your community, what objections has your sales team heard, who's your audience, what careers are they coming from, what is happening in the community that people really identify with. We want to hear every detail because that's really what's going to help us curate a really unique design that's specific to not only the brand, but to your local community and targeting that audience. It's what's going to allow our design team to listen to all that feedback and create something really special. So we go through that call. You can invite whatever stakeholders from your side, have interest in joining. And then it kicks over to our design team. And we go through a design approval process. And once that design is approved, that's really where you get to take a back seat, relax, and we handle everything from there. We're a design team, but we're also a logistics powerhouse. We handle all the procurement, meaning we're not going to send product to your community. You're never going to have to receive, hey, we sent a lamp, like, did it get there? That's not going to be what Turnkey's all about. We handle everything. So our procurement team purchases everything. We track everything. We receive everything at our warehouses. We consolidate everything. We're really proactive. If something's delayed or needs to be replaced, we're handling all of that. You don't have to worry about it. If something got lost or is missing, we make sure we're tracking and we're staying on deadline, which is really critical. And then once everything is ready to go, we coordinate installation date with the community, and our process is 2 days. So typically the first day, our white glove team comes on site. They put all the product into place, assemble everything, place everything according to a floor plan, remove all the debris. We're not going to be asking your team to throw away boxes. They really don't have to lift a finger. And then day 2 is when our designer comes in and does, the magic. That's really when they're going to put the finishing touches, placing all the detailed accessories, making the beds, hanging artwork, and really bringing life into the space. And that's pretty much it.
And one thing I wanted to point out that interested me so much in what Model 55 does is what you just mentioned in terms of 2 things. One, local designers. I think that's awesome. I mean, that's just amazing that you use someone local to the area. And number 2 is the customization to your community. So this isn't like, okay, we have our 5 plans, pick one, pick which color, and then set it. I love that because, we know in sales and marketing, Bridget, you just mentioned it, getting to know your prospect is part of the sales process. And then on the marketing side and our branding and our positioning, it's so important that we're depicting that not only in our marketing and on our website and our sales process, but also then the first impression and the models. So that's just amazing that you all do that and you get that granular because as we know, the communities all across the country, all of the ones that I've worked with are so different, especially just the different areas and the different states and design, but then the types of people and what's important to them. And is it literature, up in New England or is it Florida, right? Just understanding what makes someone feel at home. So I just wanted to point that out to the listeners. I think that's a big differentiator that perhaps you and your model, are not getting from who you're currently using.
Right. Think about the impact that you could have as an operator if you pulled the data that comes in, because you have it through your CRM or through Nick Map Vision, and then you had that discovery call with Model 55, and you talked about not only what you have experienced within your communities, right, and the regions within those, but also the data. And then you built out multiple models that appeal to the type of customer that's shopping your communities. Like that is a game changer if you use models in a way that's strategic, in my opinion.
And if you watched my episode last week, we talked about that data and I know you have it. So to tie to that, Bridget, using that data fully is amazing. And if you could talk a little bit about that too, Sasha, in terms of Brigitte just mentioned it, that branding across your portfolio. I think that's what you're, touching on. If you can talk a little bit about that too, that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, so often we talk about personas with our clients and like really understanding like, does your brand in general attract a certain audience? Like who are the personas that come to you, and we weave that into the brand. It's really critical. And what Brigitte was saying, a lot of our clients will, we develop brand standards for them that even though every model we design is unique, we always go back to the brand standards and make sure that there are a certain design that is reflected across the board. And it's, if we know, the audience likes, they see this brand as a brand that really cares, is very nurturing and high level of care, that can come through in design. So it's really critical to know that data, talk about the personas that you guys attract, and really hearing from marketing and sales, what are the conversations they're having? That's really where the crux of the data comes from.
And probably also the competitive analyses too, right? Looking at, like you said, it's a very condensed market, saturated. What are your competitors doing? What do their models look like? And not that you want to specifically, compete on those, but it just helps you against the competition.
Yeah. And it is, Sasha talked about it in the beginning. It's the little details that matter. So, especially for back to people shopping online, if your model has those little details in it and you've got those pictures online and they're looking at the community down the street and they have a model that looks great, but it looks a little bit more bare bones, it's going to feel a certain way online than looking at the one that has all the little details in it, right? I'm going to maybe want to go tour the one with the details probably first and maybe go to the other second or third, in my opinion.
Yeah, those details are really what make it look like a home.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what sets it apart from, is this just a picture or is this a home that I'm looking at?
Right. Well, thank you both. Yeah. This has been very insightful for me and hopefully for everyone listening. Is there any, not to put you on the spot, but any key takeaways, from today that you want to make sure that the listeners remember from this episode?
For me, it's making sure that you have a well-designed, well-thought-out model that speaks to your brand and the region that your communities are in, and that you utilize that model in the sales process to personalize the tour.
Yeah, that's a great one. I would say, if you're going to do it right. That's how you get the most value. And that applies to anything in life, but really, if you're going to do your models, do it right. I have this conversation with clients all the time. You want to get the maximum value of your investment. You want to see the return on it. So if you're going to do it right. And I guarantee you won't be sorry.
Well, thank you both so much for being on today. If anyone is interested in learning more about Model 55, please reach out to me or to Sasha and Brigitte. We're happy to give you more information. That's all we have for today. Thank you for joining the Drake Insights podcast. I'll see you next time. Bye. Real quick, if you enjoyed watching the podcast today, please follow me and subscribe so you're notified for the next podcast. And if you have any questions or want to talk after about anything that Drake Strategic can provide for you, please reach out to me, call me, email me, or visit our website at drakestrategic.com.